was super overwhelming for me. And that's the first moment when I thought there has to be some kind of app for this already, for calculating how much insulin to give yourself, because that was the hardest part for me. And that's where the idea sprouted. And I joked with my doctor saying, yeah, just make this app for you. When I came home from the hospital the next day, I started working on it and I thought I can actually make this app myself.
Today, I'm excited to be joined by Drew Mendelow, founder of T1D1. Drew was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at just 13 years old and almost immediately experienced how overwhelming it can be to manage insulin dosing every single day. Instead of accepting that challenge as the status quo, he started building a solution. What began as a personal project grew into T1D1, a nonprofit dedicated to making diabetes care accessible. Today, T1D1 offers the first free FDA-Cleared over-the-counter insulin calculator app for people with type 1 diabetes. In this conversation, we talk about Drew's journey from a self-taught developer to becoming a young entrepreneur and the long road to FDA clearance, and what it means to truly build healthcare technology that puts patients first. Drew, thanks so much for joining me. Hey, Drew, good to see you today.
Hey, good to see you as well.
So let's start off with how we know each other, and then maybe you can give yourself a quick introduction. So Drew and I first met at Abbott, where we both worked on a product called CardioMEMS, which is kind of more in the heart failure space. But Drew was an intern and I was a systems engineer. So that's how we first met. And I learned about his company, T1D1, which is very cool to learn about. And I'm excited to be chatting about that today. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. So I guess a little bit about myself. I just finished my freshman year at Georgia Tech. I just finished my internship at Abbott as well. And my passion project is called T1D1. So that's the company I own. It stands for type 1 diabetes from day one of diagnosis. And it's the first FDA cleared over the counter insulin calculator. So it's an app that I created and I got it FDA cleared at the end of last year. And it's fully free. It's to help people manage type 1 diabetes.
So I kept wondering what the D1 stood for. So that makes a lot of sense now. I guess jumping back to where this all first started, I'm sure you've told the story like a million times, but like, you know, as a child, when you got diagnosed, how were you feeling in that moment? Like, walk us through the raw, like what was happening to you?
Sure. So this was 6 years ago. So I was 13 at the time. This was during COVID. And the main signs, I guess, that I knew to even go to the doctor was I was drinking a lot of water and I was peeing a lot. And then I lost about 10 pounds in just a couple months. And this was like my growth spurt. So that was pretty concerning. But it was all like not super crazy because I was playing a lot of soccer. I was very active. Like it made sense that I was drinking more water and going to the bathroom more because of that. But the weight loss is the reason I went to the doctor. And I went to the doctor. They did a couple tests. And on the way back home from the doctor, they gave us a call and said, you need to go straight to the hospital. You have type 1 diabetes. So that was pretty crazy. And I felt like pretty fine in that moment. Like I felt normal. I wasn't like throwing up or anything crazy like that, but I was being rushed to the hospital, which is a pretty weird experience. But then I got to the hospital and they told me officially I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And then all this like terms were thrown at me, education on insulin, how it works in your body, a calculation to that you need to know to give yourself insulin, just really all the education on what this is, what you'll need for literally the rest of your life. So just a lot of information. It was super overwhelming for me. And that's kind of the first moment when I thought there has to be some kind of app for this already. And mainly for calculating how much insulin to give yourself, because that was the hardest part for me. And that's where the idea sprouted. And I joked with my doctor saying, yeah, just make this app for you, just kind of as a joke. And then when I came home from the hospital the next day, I started working on it and I thought I can actually make this app myself. That's kind of where the whole idea came from. But it was really a lot when I was diagnosed. There's just a lot going on. It's pretty scary because insulin is pretty serious. If you give yourself too much insulin, you can go into a coma, or in severe cases, you could die. And if you give yourself not enough, you can go into, it's called diabetic ketoacidosis, and you go right back to the hospital. So it's something you really need to get down. And just the fact that you have to calculate and understand how much to give yourself literally for the rest of your life, and this can be like 5 times a day, it's pretty scary. So that was my main reasoning for creating this app, to just help with that stress.
Mm. That's a very inspiring story. And I think a lot of good technology comes from people who are personally experiencing problems in their life. So, yeah. Okay. As a follow-up to that, did you always like coding or like how did this interest come about?
I took a couple computer science classes in middle school and throughout high school I did as well. But really that summer before, so I was diagnosed just after the summer in 2020, so in September. And during that summer, I was getting into learning how to make video games. So I've always loved video games. I still play them today, but I really wanted to learn how to actually code them myself. So that whole summer, I was literally just like coding away. I took a virtual summer camp on how to code video games as well, which was fun. That's what I was diving into, and that's kind of how I learned. That was the main way I learned how to code. And then when this came up and I had this idea to make this app, I thought I had some coding experience. I could try to do this, but really creating an app is completely different from a video game. It's different language. It's fully different structure. It's very different, except for the fact that it's a coding language, really. But it gave me the confidence knowing I could learn this and I can create it myself.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. So, do you want to become a game developer?
No, I'd love to keep doing some game development stuff. It was really fun. I was
Yeah.
having a blast. Me and my brother, we would record sounds, and I made like a first person shooter game, for example. And so like we would make sounds like into the mic, and that would be like what the gunshot sound was, and we'd do like a bunch of stuff for fun, literally the whole summer. It was really fun, but I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I haven't done too much since.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure T1D1 keeps you very busy. So, I was looking at the T1D1 website and it seems like your family is also heavily involved with the development of this project. Can you kind of walk me through that? How everyone's been supportive to you and been helpful to you in different ways?
Yeah, sure. My parents have really been there from the beginning. I created the app fully on my own, developed it. I literally learned how to create apps off of Google and YouTube. That was really it. And my parents have been really helpful with helping me navigate like communications, like emailing people, getting in touch with hospitals, for example, kind of understanding more of the business side and like how to register it as an LLC, for example, originally, and now as a nonprofit. Really more of the side I haven't touched before. And now day to day wise, all three of us, my dad, my mom, and me, we're all kind of the main team of reaching out to people. I'll do a bunch of live demos for hospitals, but they're really there for the operations side, I would say. They don't haven't touched any of the development side of it or anything like that, but they've just been super supportive. I really don't think I would be able to be where I am today without them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said you were in the hospital, you got back home, and the next day you started working on T1D1. Walk me through, what were some of the initial technical challenges? You're teaching yourself a whole new skill set, starting to develop that at 13. Like when did the app get into a state where you thought it was like functional? Yeah, walk me through that whole timeline.
Yeah, sure. It was a lot of work and a lot for me to learn, I would say. One side of it is learning how to create an app. I've had some like a little bit of coding experience before then, but like creating an app is a fully new language. I built it in Xamarin, which was C sharp and XAML, which was I haven't really done anything with that before. And it's an app. The structure of an app is just completely different from a video game, for example. So it's just all the stuff I had to learn. And I was literally just using YouTube and Google and just kind of figuring it out myself. And then the other side of it was I was also newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I didn't fully know what the app needed. So I was talking with my doctor a lot about, is this feature something that other people would use? Because I know my situation, but there's other people who might have different situations and might need different things. I just simply don't know. So it was really interesting for me to one learn how to create an app, but also learn what the app would actually need for people with type 1. And so a good example is my app has something called negative correction factor. And the basic way to explain it is if your blood sugar level is too low, when you go to give yourself insulin, it'll reduce the amount of insulin that the calculation will give you. So you don't give yourself too much. And this is something I just had no idea that this was a thing. And this is something my doctor told me about to add into the app. So there's just stuff that I was learning along the way that I just didn't know the app would need. So that was really cool for me. But more of the day to day work was literally just me in my room. I had online school because it was during COVID. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I was just kind of figuring out, going step by step. I made like a basic calculator for insulin, and then I made somewhere where you can track everything on the next screen, and then like a basic settings page where you can change some settings for the calculation. And this overall took me about a month and a half before I had a fully like viable product that could actually be used. And after that month and a half, I just released it for free to everyone.
Awesome. So I'm hearing that there was 2 challenges. The first was what to code, and the second was how to code. And you're
Yeah.
kind of tackling both of those at the same time, which is
Hmm.
which is really cool. And then you released it to the App Store, which was great, and you had a ton of downloads, but then you had to get FDA approval. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. That was the main issue there.
Yeah. So you released the app around 2 months after you were first diagnosed.
Mhm.
And how long was it on the App Store before it got taken down?
It was on for about 6 months, so
Okay.
it was a decent amount of time. It got, I think, around 40,000 downloads around there, maybe 45, before Apple said, "You need FDA clearance. This has to be taken down until you get it."
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's it just that number, 40,000 people, it kinda shows how great that need really was and how important T1D1 is in terms of accomplishing a mission for people. But yeah, that's actually so crazy because I think the other day I was reading an article that was talking about, like, before insulin pumps were released, people would be out, like, kind of creating their own little continuous loop because there was just such a great need for that. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's very interesting to explore. You get to 6 months in the market, and then
Mhm.
you're told that this app has to be taken down. How did you feel? Were you freaked out? Were you like, "Oh, no, what do I do?" Like, obviously, it's helping a lot of people. A lot of people are relying on this app for their day-to-day insulin that they
Mm.
need to survive. Yeah, I guess, what were your thoughts? How did you regroup, and what happened from there?
Yeah, it was definitely a feeling of shock, but it was almost a sad feeling of I just made this to help people and now it's getting taken down. Like I'm not trying to get any financial benefit or anything off of this app. So it's a huge hurdle that I had to get over. But I would say I didn't ever feel like I wanted to give up. Like this was definitely something I wanted to make sure it was still out there, no matter how much work needed to be put into it. And I really did want to keep persevering. I was very happy to find out when the app gets taken down, people who have already downloaded it can keep it on their phone, but there just can't be any new downloads. So that part was really nice, knowing that the people who really needed it and who are already using it still can continue to use it in the meantime. Because that would have been really bad in my mind if all these people had this great tool and they loved using it and then all of a sudden it was just gone for them. But this was a huge setback for me. And literally me and my parents, so we started to try to make some of the documentation for the FDA ourselves. Like we started writing some things and we quickly realized like we can't do this. We need some kind of expert. We need some help on this. So we just started literally the next about like year, maybe 2 years. We were just reaching out to everyone we could, trying to get help and really just looking for the expert there. And eventually we did find help, which was amazing. But it was kind of a shock to just figure out that this needed FDA clearance in the first place because I just had no idea that this kind of thing needed FDA clearance.
I think working at Abbott, both you and I, we were working on a mobile app product, and I
Mm.
think that brought me a lot of insight into all the regulatory that goes behind a patient-facing mobile app technology. Did you also see, I guess, a lot of the parallels there, and can you, yeah, walk me through, like, everything that happened? Because I know you guys got involved with an institution in Zurich, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm. But yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely working at Abbott, you can see how much work that was put into the FDA like documentation side and speaking with the FDA, making sure this is all right and running studies if needed. It was a lot of work. So basically we were reaching out to everyone the next year and a half, and then eventually I entered a competition in Switzerland. The competition was at the Diabetes Center of Bern, and this was like an innovation competition for diabetes tech products, which was perfect. I entered this competition. I was 14 at the time, and I was the youngest person in the competition. And they were really inspired by how young I was, and I believe I got top 20, and I didn't end up winning, but they were just very inspired by my story and what I managed to do already. And they just offered to fully fund the FDA process, which was just amazing. And it was, I mean, we were crying. It was really cool. So that's how the help kind of started. And they connected me with another company in Switzerland, a software development company, to help me to fully rebuild the app with them. And then they were the ones who actually made all the FDA documentation. So the full rebuild of the app and getting all the documentation was about 2 to 3 years. And I worked alongside them. We had like a project manager and there's an actual team. So I was like almost one of the developers on that team with them. And I actually went 2 summers ago, I went to Zurich for the whole summer to work on it with them. So that was a super cool experience. And it was like a full-time job, which was awesome. And eventually after these 3 years, we had a fully working app that was fully rebuilt from the ground, and a bunch of new features added in as well, which was awesome. And then all the documentation was made, which was literally hundreds of documents. And some of them were like hundreds of pages themselves, which was the amount of work there was insane. I didn't realize it needed that much. And then the last step needed was a human factors study. So this was, since the app is over the counter, the FDA required some kind of study to show people can download it and use it safely on their own without any kind of doctor being there. So the study was basically just giving the app to people, having them download it and just say like, calculate insulin and seeing that they can do it on their own without any other instructions pretty much. That was the last step needed. And that on its own, we did not have the funding for. That would have been around $200,000 just to run that study, which is crazy. So we reached out again to some more companies and eventually Dexcom, which is a huge diabetes tech company, they offered to just run it in-house for us, which was amazing. So that was the last step needed. And then we officially could submit to the FDA. And then August of last year, which was 2025, we officially got FDA cleared. So that was the whole 5-year journey to get FDA clearance, which was, it was a lot.
Yeah, I think, yeah, especially I feel like in the medical industry or anything that's healthcare adjacent, there is so much more work that goes into that. And that's definitely something I realized at Abbott. But I wanted to ask, so why did you guys have to rebuild the app completely? Was there not like, I guess, like verification, validation testing you could do on the existing app and just leverage that?
So I think the main thing was just to make sure that there were the proper things in place for security reasons, for testing. Like I didn't have any unit tests or anything like that in the original app. So it would make more development pretty tedious. And then also the language I used originally was Xamarin, which actually now is, I believe, deprecated. So it was a little bit older. And so now we use Flutter, but Flutter is a pretty new language and it's pretty up to date. So there was a lot more things we could do with it. But it was just easier, especially since they were making all the documentation along with it. If we fully rebuilt it, you can really make sure the documentation matches exactly. And then there were some other things that we wanted to add. So, for example, there's accounts in the new app. The old app was all just locally on your phone. And so accounts, we can have it. So if, let's say, you have parents who are divorced and you're at 2 different households, you can all use the same account and you all have all the same data, which is really nice, which the old app you couldn't do. But the app also has the ability to go offline. So if you're in an area without Wi-Fi access, you can still use it and it'll sync up later. So there's features like that that we wanted to add into this new app, and rebuilding it from scratch would just make sure everything has the right structure and foundation for that as well.
Yeah, cybersecurity and things like that are definitely a big concern. Okay, so then can we walk through, I guess, more of the technical features of the app? I know you mentioned the negative correction factor, and then you guys have the bolus calculator, and
Mm,
then you can also input your basal dose as well,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess let's start with for folks who are less familiar with, type 1 diabetes, like why all
Mhm.
these features are important and how they work in the app and how they make life easier for people with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, sure. So especially right when you're diagnosed, those first couple weeks, you have to, almost everyone, there are some places where you'll get an insulin pump like from day one, which is amazing, but I would say over 90% of the people don't. And you'll have to give yourself insulin injections 5 times a day or more. And each time you give yourself insulin, you need to calculate how much to give yourself. It's not just a set amount every time. Um, and this calculation itself is a difficult part, especially if you're a child, if you're under 10, for example, which a lot of people are when they're diagnosed, it can be really difficult. So the main function of the app is a bolus calculator, something that helps you calculate how much insulin to give yourself each time. The basic way that the calculator works is each person has 3 settings that are given to them from their doctor. One's called a target blood glucose. So it's that level that your blood sugar is supposed to be at, that kind of target level. A correction factor, which is based on how much you deviate from that target level, how much more or less insulin to give yourself. And then the last one is called a carb ratio, where if you're eating a meal, depending on how much carbs you eat, you have that much extra insulin. That's the basic idea. But these three settings are given to you from your doctor, and then the calculation is different based on those settings. So it's personalized to each person. And so what the app does is it allows you to put those settings in the settings page in the app. There's some other advanced settings, like you mentioned, negative correction factor and some other stuff there, which can be more niche scenarios. But then when they go to calculate insulin, there's that main bolus calculator section where they just put in their current blood sugar and how many carbs they're eating, and it'll give them the exact amount of insulin they should take. So the main idea is to relieve stress and kind of remove the whole calculation piece from the burden that they have to do it, 5 times a day, and just enter their numbers and say calculate, and it'll tell it for them. And then the secondary function of the app is being able to track all this data in the app in the same place. So after you calculate, you can just click log it at the very bottom, and it puts everything into a nice data log inside the app for you. And then this is something you can share with your doctor later, so you can see trends and how to tweak your settings, for example, and other things that are needed. And so it's the main idea of the app is really just calculate how much insulin that you need to take, make sure you're confident and that it's safe and accurate, and then also just take the stress off of your back, really, especially in those first couple weeks of diagnosis.
Yeah, I think when your life depends on the amount of insulin that you are taking, that is super nerve-wracking. You're like, what if I accidentally multiply this by the wrong number?
Mhm.
So it's very nice to have that clarity, like this, it calculated it right. I know I'm going to be good.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask as a follow-up. So you said a lot of people immediately, I guess two questions, immediately don't get onto an insulin pump. So my first question is, when T1D1 came out, this was like kind of pre-insulin pump being mainstream, right?
I would say it's like in the middle.
In the middle. Okay. And why do people not get on insulin pumps right away? Is there like a certain thing that insurances need to see in order for you to qualify?
Yeah, there's two main reasons. One is that they're very expensive. So some of them can be up to $10,000, which is insane. And then also along with that, you have to buy all the supplies needed. So every 3 days, I have an insulin pump now. So I have to change every 3 days. You have to inject more insulin in it, put a new site on your body. There's a couple things you need to do every 3 days. And so all those supplies you have to buy, every month, which can also be very expensive. And this cost can just be a lot for a lot of people. And that's, I think, the main reason why a lot of people don't have insulin pumps. But then the other reason is, as you mentioned, insurance can make it very difficult. So I was actually pretty lucky that my grandma also has type 1 diabetes. So I was somewhat familiar with it. I wouldn't say I was an expert at all, but I knew of it. I knew you can live with it and thrive. But since she also had it, she was from day one saying, hey, you need to get on an insulin pump. You need to get this. Like she was telling us what we needed to do. And even knowing this, it still took me about 6 months to get an insulin pump just because of insurance, which was pretty crazy. So those first 6 months that's really the gap that I'm focusing on. Of even if the financial situation wasn't an issue, the insurance was, and so those 6 months I was on my own. I had to calculate myself and give myself insulin, and that's where the app can come in handy. But really, insulin pumps, it's more of a privilege, and a lot of people, the majority of people, don't have insulin pumps. So that's really the gap that I'm trying to solve here and really give the care for everyone.
Mhm. Also, let me ask. So I know with like the tandem pump, you have
Mm.
like cannulation kits that you need to buy to obviously change your site every 3 days, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So is insurance reimbursing that, or are they just reimbursing the actual hardware and the drug?
I believe they reimburse some of the monthly payments. I'm honestly not too sure on all of that, but I think there's like a portion that we still have to pay. Honestly, I don't know the specifics on that part,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the actual pump itself can, even if insurance covers some, it can still be very expensive.
Yeah. And accessibility is definitely super important because there is so many downstream things that can happen from not managing your diabetes. I think a good example of this is, so 2 years ago now, I had an opportunity to go to the Rio Grande Valley down in South Texas. And a lot of people had diabetes that was uncontrolled, unmanaged. And a lot of people ended up with diabetic foot neuropathy and amputations. So, like, it goes to show you that excessive, like a lot of people in med tech are like, oh yeah, let's build like the coolest, newest, shiniest thing. But I think T1D1 really goes to show that maintaining accessibility is super important.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah.
And I would say also it's not T1D1 is not a super, crazy algorithm with all this like AI technology or anything super complex. It's a formula. At the end of the day, it's just multiplication and division. The calculation is too advanced where you couldn't understand it. It's just I would say a lot to do every single time. So I would say overall it's a basic app, but it's a necessity that a lot of people can use.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So can you walk us through when you had to start going through all this regulatory stuff, what testing was really important for the app? What documentation was really important as you guys were navigating the 510K submission?
Yeah, testing wise, I would say definitely making sure the calculation itself and the Bulls calculator was 100% working as intended and that there was no issues there. That was for sure the main goal. And we didn't have any real issues or any time it was working improperly, which is awesome. But that was the main piece that the FDA really wanted to drill down on and make sure that was fully safe and accurate. So really making sure the calculation was showing the right numbers. There was no bugs or anything on displaying any insulin numbers or anything along those lines. That was definitely the main part. But documentation wise, kind of going along with that, the risk analysis is what I would say was the most important. And this is just a huge document saying how important some things are and what could cause risk if it was used improperly or if it malfunctioned for some reason. So for example, what's a good example? If you misuse the calculator screen and accidentally type in a wrong number, so if you meant to enter 100, but you accidentally click the zero again, enter 1,000. That could be higher risk and it could give you a lot more insulin and that could lead to some bad things. So that would be higher on the risk analysis and we'd have to write a section on that, for example. One thing in the app that we did to prevent something like this is we have a minimum and a maximum when you enter your blood sugar. So if you meant to enter 100, that's fine. But anything, I forget the exact limit, I think it's above 500, it would pop a message and say, hey, double check this or go to your hospital if you're actually that high. So there's some measures in the app to prevent things like this that would cause a lot of risk. But that risk analysis was kind of the source of truth in my mind of what could go wrong in the app, what we have to make sure is fully secure, and what we really have to test to make sure it's safe.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's all about identifying and mitigating your risks. So are you guys a class 2 software as a medical device or a class 1?
Yes, class two.
Okay. Can you walk me through the rationale? What did your regulatory advisors also tell you in terms of where you would fit in the best?
So for me, I mean, I personally didn't even know it was needed to be FDA cleared at the beginning. I was kind of surprised that they put it in class two as a medical device because this was something. It's not actually giving you the insulin; it's just telling you the amount. But the way that the FDA sees it, and this is how they regulate all insulin calculators or anything along those lines of if it's recommending insulin dosages, this is the way my regulatory person described it, then it just puts it in class two immediately. So it was pretty, I guess, standard for those lines. But in my mind, especially back then when I was 14 or 15 when we started working with them, it was pretty surprising that something like this, which was literally just a calculation, was so highly regulated. It was pretty surprising to me. But just the fact that it was recommending insulin dosages, even if it wasn't giving it to them, that's what classified it as class two.
Mhm. That makes sense. And I think also like regulatory classifications will change over time as a certain type of technology becomes more and more familiar and mainstream. So
For sure.
I guess so you guys are 510K. So what was your predicate?
The predicate was very tough because this is the first over-the-counter insulin calculator that is FDA cleared. So there was no real like perfect predicate that was over the counter. So we had to look at some other apps. So I guess to give you a bit of background, all the insulin pumps have insulin calculators inside of them, but they're not obviously over the counter since you need the insulin pump that needs to be prescribed by a doctor. So like Tandem has an insulin pump. There are some also smart pens. One is called InPen, for example, where it's a pen where you can inject insulin, but then the pen itself transmits that to an app where you can track stuff like that. That also needs to be prescribed to you. But that was the most similar thing we could find. where it's an app about injections and tracking all that the amount. But just the fact that it wasn't over the counter was a little bit of the difficult part. But I believe we use InPen as the predicate device there, the app. And it was really the main piece was trying to explain to the FDA and kind of ask what was necessary to keep it over the counter, what steps need to be taken. And really that main piece was that human factor study that I mentioned before to prove that it could be used by people.
Yeah. How did you guys get in contact with Dexcom?
Oof. What was the original? I don't remember the exact person or company, but we were just we since we were reaching out to all these people for help, we had a
Yeah.
huge network of people, and eventually one of them had a contact with the CEO of Dexcom. So
Mm.
we had a quick talk with him, which was awesome. He was super awesome, and then he connected us with the regulatory side, and eventually the human factors team. We were connected to a lot of people throughout Dexcom company that weren't in the right teams, and they kept redirecting us to different places.
Yeah.
But eventually we got to the regulatory team, and the main person there, Simon, he helped us and just pretty much said, "Yeah, we'll run this for you," which was amazing.
Yeah. That's awesome. So T1D1, I think you've mentioned this multiple times by now, but T1D1 is completely free, and now you guys are a 501c nonprofit.
Hmm.
What, I guess, I know you have this mission of helping people, but what led you to choose this route instead of traditional venture backed or customer paying app, I guess?
The main reason is just to show that, hey, we're not here to make a bunch of money off of you. I think especially with type 1 diabetes, and I'm sure with a lot of other diseases, these like big pharma companies kind of have a bad stigma of taking advantage of patients and kind of getting as much money as possible. And since this is something that people need to live, people have a very negative thought around that. So the reason of making a nonprofit is to show, hey, we're here for your benefit. This is a free app. We're not trying to make any money off of you. This is strictly a tool to help you. So that's the main reasoning for the nonprofit there. But also, I would say a lot of people and companies are more willing to back a nonprofit rather than a for-profit, kind of for that same reason. But for them to fully understand, like, if you're investing in this company, we're not going to give you a big, financial return. This is really for the good of people with type 1.
Mm, yeah. So then, from a sustainability perspective, because I'm sure you had initial costs, especially developing the app and then going through the FDA submission. But
Mhm.
from a sustainability perspective, dealing with keeping the app updated, dealing with bugs, et cetera, et cetera. How I guess how do you plan to fund that kind of model?
Yeah, that's definitely the biggest question of what's the business model, especially with the free app. And
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of people along the way have told me that this was not going to work. Like this is not something that'd be viable. But so for that first FDA, like rebuilding of the app and all the documentation, as I mentioned, that whole thing was funded by Diabetes Center of Bern, which was amazing. And that came out to around $500,000, which was a lot of money. Now it's fully released again, and we have maintenance costs and other things like that. So we did a couple crowdfunding campaigns, which got us a little bit of money to really just keep us going for that little bit, and for the rest of last year and the beginning of this year, which was great. But now the main source of revenue is we're looking at partnerships with other big companies. We have one that we've already signed, and that gives us some annual revenue, which is amazing. Unfortunately, I can't talk about too much of the details or anything around that because it's not public or anything live there. But this is great that it gives us now an annual source of revenue that could keep our costs alive, pay for the server costs, maintenance, updates, which is great. And then lastly, we applied to a couple grants. We got one grant this year already from Beyond Type 1, and we're in process. We were accepted into an accelerator program, and there's a possibility of winning, I think, $100,000 at the end of it if we qualify, which would be amazing, from American Heart Association. So that's another grant we're looking at. But these grants are amazing to allow us to add new features. One of the main things I'm working on right now is translating the app, and eventually we're going to look at expanding it again into all these other countries because right now it's only in the US. Uh, the issue with other countries is that we have to do all the regulation work, which is a lot of money again. But grants are there to help us add new features and reach more people. And then ideally, the main source of revenue to keep the business flowing is looking for partnerships with companies that want to integrate or license a product, for example.
Hmm. That makes sense. I appreciate the commitment to keeping it an accessible app just because like there's so much talk about insulin prices already being such a big hurdle for people. So
Mhm.
adding another hurdle on top of that is not ideal at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool. So then you kind of started talking a little bit about what's next for T1D1 in terms of, getting into new countries. I guess what new features are you looking to add if you're open to sharing?
Yeah, no, sure. The main one is, as I mentioned, translations. That's kind of the biggest one on my plate. Even if going to other countries is a little bit out of the roadmap for now, in the US, there's a large population of Spanish speakers. So that's the main priority for me, and I've gotten a lot of feedback on this. I know it's a very big issue. A lot of people want Spanish to be a translation of the app, so a lot more people can use this app, and we can really make sure that there's no issues if people are using in English and that's not their first language, that they don't accidentally use it in a way we didn't intend. So really translating is the top priority for us right now, and we're actively working on this. But it's really for me, it comes to just reaching as many people as possible, and that's why we're translating. That's why we're trying to look at other countries as well. There's some other features that I can't mention exactly right now, but the majority of our focus is on translations. There are some other there are some other features we want to add alongside of education wise, where we're working with a couple hospitals that provided us with a bunch of educational videos, especially when you're newly diagnosed, that would kind of go along with the app of this app is a way for you to calculate insulin dosages. Here's also all this education content for free that you could use if you're confused on any other parts of type 1, for example. So that's a big piece that I'm going to try to focus on in the future of making sure there's an education piece alongside this tool. And so that I'm working with a couple hospitals that would provide the content for that. And we're working on how that would be displayed and kind of the details on that. But I think that would be very exciting, especially since this is free and a lot of people use it already. So to have that education there as well would be really helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think patient education is super important. And I definitely got to see that at Abbott for sure, where it's like patients sometimes don't fully know what's going on. And I think having something that's accessible, convenient, and integrated with a calculator that they already are using or need is super nice. So then, okay, how have you seen T1D1 change people's lives? Like, have you had a chance to talk to anybody who used the app and they're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, this changed my life in so many ways, especially also with the log feature and being able to share that with your physician.
Yeah. In the early stages, in those first 6 months, I probably got about 2 to 3 emails a day minimum of people reaching out saying how much they love the app, how much it's helped them. Some amazing stories. One of them, which has always stuck with me, was a mother who reached out. Her daughter was just diagnosed with type 1, and she didn't feel comfortable with her sleeping over at her grandmother's house because she didn't think that they could calculate and give insulin safely. So she just didn't trust them. But then using the T1D1 app, she was fully confident, and her daughter could sleep at her grandparents' house again, which was it was a really nice story for me to hear. This is, I mean, literally kind of improving their lives. It was bringing families together, making sure that they felt safe and they felt like they can calculate accurately. That was just a heartwarming story that's always stuck with me. But I would get stories like that like 3 times a day minimum in those early stages, which was just super cool to hear. Even now, I still get some emails here and there of people reaching out and saying how much they love it and giving feedback, which is awesome. I always love to hear feedback. But also more recently, I've been targeting a lot of diabetes conferences, mainly where the doctors and nurses and diabetes educators are, not really patient focused. So I get to talk with a lot of the doctors and hospitals and see their perspective on it. And I have met a lot of people using the app in the doctor setting who have really enjoyed it and really love it, which has been super cool. And of course, I get their feedback and ask them for feedback on certain things that I'm working on. So it's been really awesome to hear that on both sides of the patients are really enjoying it. It's really helping them, and it's making the doctors' lives easier as well. So it's been really cool for me to hear that, and of course, get all the feedback from both of them.
Yeah. Would you, I guess, like kind of drawing more on that Abbott experience, but would you ever like consider having a web platform for physicians?
Yeah, that's been something I've worked on for a while. I think this is something that we're looking to do towards probably next year. I don't know if we'll get to it this year. we're working on something similar to this. I again can't get too much in the details, sadly, but this would allow basically clinicians to get the data outside of right now. Patients have to just email the data directly and it's in two CSV files, which was the easiest way I could figure out how to do it without making it too invasive and add some other complications into it. So we're working on a way where physicians can get the data themselves without, having to go through the email mess and make it very complicated there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like you guys have some very exciting next steps and features that people can look forward to. So, I also want to highlight that you're a full-time student at Georgia Tech studying computer science. How's it been to balance all of this? Because I know during COVID, I was probably one of the most productive people. Like I feel like I had so much time, everything was great, but now everything's back in person and being a student at Georgia Tech, I mean, it's a very competitive school, a very intense curriculum. How do you manage to balance it all and like kind of what are your strategies to ensure everything gets done?
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot, especially that first semester last year for me, that full semester. That was my first semester in college. I had, full class load and then that was when I released T1D1 again. That's when it got cleared and I made it go live again. So there was a lot of communications and media interviews and a lot of other things that I had to work with alongside of my already schoolwork schedule, that was definitely a lot for me to manage. The biggest thing that helped me was creating just a to-do list of this is what I have today. This is a to-do list, organize it by priority, and then go through it. And that just kind of helped me understand like I don't have a bunch of things like this is possible. This is what I have to do. I have it written out and you just get to work. And then eventually you check off each one. You realize that wasn't as bad as I thought. That really helped me to manage the stress side of it, I would say. But it's definitely been a lot. Like I would in between classes, I would take a call for T1D when I'd be sitting, in the random building on Georgia Tech in like a study area taking a call. So it was a lot of work and I had to figure out how to manage around it. And then when I came to work at Abbott, I was doing no classes. I was doing full time at Abbott. So that was also very difficult for me. I would have to take calls before, after, or occasionally during the day, which was it was pretty difficult. But I was able to figure out the best times to schedule calls for, which really helped to make it not as stressful, and also just understand how to get the work done, and also make sure I'm getting to these calls and doing what I need to do.
Mm, yeah, I think you're right. I think humans have a tendency to get overwhelmed, like, "Oh, no, there's way too much to do and I can't do all this." But I
Yeah.
like how you're in control of that narrative and instead being like, "I can do all of this." I think mindset is super important. Yeah. Okay, so then I wanna ask, since you're very familiar with the entire diabetes space, where do you see the field going? What are the next big gaps in type 1 diabetes care in general? Yeah.
This is a tough question. I would say the education piece is very important. I think there's a lot of education already out there. A lot of hospitals, a lot of other companies have all this education out there, which is amazing. But I think it's very difficult for people to consume all this education. I think it's hard for you as a newly diagnosed person to understand where to look to find this information. So I think if there was kind of an easy place to get all this educational content or almost a place that would tailor it for you of, hey, I see this person is really struggling with this specific thing. Here's some education for that instead of, giving you this humongous library of education. I think that would be the most helpful thing. But then to go along with that, the accessibility of this education needs to be given to everyone, not just people who are lucky enough to go to this hospital or lucky enough to do this. I think it would really have to be a tool to allow everyone who gets newly diagnosed to have the education they need.
Mm, yeah, I can agree with that. I think the amount of like, especially now, you go on ChatGPT and just search up like a million things, and it's like, well, what's credible, what's not credible? Like, there's like 1 trillion sites on here. Like,
Mhm.
so I think that's definitely super important. What advice do you have for someone who's trying to start their own company in the healthcare space, going through this entire journey, I guess, like being a young innovator, entrepreneur? Yeah, what are some little nuggets of advice that you can give?
Sure. I think I have two main pieces of advice. The first one is really understand the problem. So if this is something you've experienced, that's probably the best scenario of you know exactly what needs to be done, you know the issue, and you know kind of the best way to go about solving it. That was kind of my case. I was experiencing this when I was diagnosed, which was great. But if you haven't experienced it yourself, I would say go and find people who either have the disease or whatever you're working through, find people with that problem. Really understand the problem before you just make a solution out of nowhere. And then the second piece of advice is just to start building. Like, I think this is very common advice that a lot of people give, even outside of the healthcare space of if you want to start something, the best time to start it is now. Like, if you keep delaying it and keep waiting and say, oh, it's not the best time, it's never going to get done. And you may be too late. Maybe someone already beats you to it and makes something that you wish you made yourself. So it's definitely important to just start the work. And it's never going to be the perfect time for you. You just have to really start.
I think that's great advice. Sometimes you just need to get yourself off your bed, do the thing, and just see what happens. So,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah. Thanks so much, Drew. I really enjoyed hearing about your story. Truly inspirational.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.